the essay. He says that just to place your brain on the lane of the essay, you will write 90% of the time.
Okay, we'll just continue. We look at the web and web development on mobile devices. What do we have to think about? The viewport, which is the area of the browser in which the page fits. Browsers may assume a standard page width. We want to control the page scaling by defining the viewport in the meta tag. Because actually mobile devices does scale your web page anyhow. So it doesn't fit to the pixel and pixel ratio of the screen. In iOS devices, for example, you have virtual pixel density and you have a pixel density. But with the viewport element, you can say that, for example, the width of your web page should be the width of the device. And you can also set properties like initial scale if you want the mobile device to scale the web page when you load it. For example, having an initial scale of 2 or 0.5 or something like that. Or if you don't want it to scale it, because they do sometimes, depending on the content, you set an initial scale to 1. And here it says user scalable no. And that means that, for example, the user can't pinch to zoom on your web page. Inline images. Page loading time can be reduced by keeping all data in a single file. The data URI is a mechanism for embedding image data directly in the source attribute of the image tag. Have you heard about base x64 encoding? It's encoding binary data down to a string of characters. So if you base 64 encode something, we can provide that data directly inline in an HTML document, which is text-based. And that's what we are doing with data URIs. Here we say that, because this is in base 64 encoded PNG, we say that this is data and it has the metadata type image/PNG, and the encoding is base 64, and then we have the actual data. So that's the image encoded as base 64. It can also be used either in image tag in the source attribute, or you can use it in CSS files in the URL. What do you call it? URL, parts of for example, background images, and so on. In the last example here, we have raw UTF-8 text SVG, so we can also provide that. Image SVG plus XML, that's the metadata type, and then we say that the encoding is UTF-8, and then we provide the string. So these are 2 examples of inline images. Can you see the inline data URI images? I couldn't make them large, so I had to make some small black dots. But if you look at the DOM element, if I right-click here and we inspect, you see that the first example is data image, which is base 64 encoded, and this string is the encoding of the image. So that's the actual image data. Or you can use it in CSS in this way. This is background, and we have the URL, and we say that this is a data image, SVG plus XML, and we provide an SVG string. Because whenever a web browser is inspecting or interpreting an HTML documents, they do requests every time they see an image. Okay, we have to get this image, they do a request. And this way we are reducing the number of requests to the server by providing images directly inline. What are the cons by using this way of inlining images? What implications do you think a 10 megabyte high resolution image have on your HTML? If you base 64 encoded and put it inline in your HTML.
It takes a lot of time to load.
Yeah. And you hog the HTTP stream so that it loads and loads and loads. It has to download all this data in that request, and it can't do it async. And then it can't render the page before it has all the HTML data. Yeah, you have to consider using this whenever it is viable. Okay, you can link to phone features. Many mobile devices are also phones. These may be able to set up phone calls when a user clicks a link by using tel : on an href, for example. You have CSS media queries. The CSS HTML element media attribute is not sufficient for selecting a style sheet based on devices. So now you have media queries in CSS. And then you can provide certain rules to certain contexts. So this rule, or the rules that are in the brackets here in this media query, are only valid for screens that have max device width 480 pixels. And it's these media queries that we utilize for responsive web pages, if you have tried making responsive web pages. Then we apply rules for small screen and other rules for large screens. We can do platform detection in JavaScript as well, with app name, app version, meme types, and platform. Focus and scroll management. Scrolling can be inconvenient on many mobile devices, but page code may pre-scroll, so we can scroll to certain heights in the document. And you can focus on input elements, for example, if you want to trigger the user to write text in a certain input element on load. Touch events. We have touch events on touch devices, like mobile phones and tablets. DOM elements support touch events on mobile devices. The events are on-touch start, on-touch end, on-touch move, and there are others as well. The way you use on-touch start, for example, here we add an event listener, touch start, and we provide a callback function with an event object. And in that event object, we have an array with change touches. So that means that if you do a gesture, for example, with three fingers, and you release one of the fingers before the two others, it will trigger an untouch end event. If you release all three simultaneously, you will have one untouch end for all three. And then you will have an array with changed touches of the length of three. Touch events. There are a lot of mobile web application frameworks. These are thin web wrappers for HTML, CSS, and JavaScript-based applications. Typically, frameworks that makes you or enables you to build native apps with web technologies. Typically, they extend the web wrapper functionality with exposing APIs to access sensors, file system, and other native-only features like PhoneGap, Ionic, React Native, Trigger IO, etc. So you build these apps with web technologies. Okay, mobile web application best practices. First of all, security and privacy. Remember that JSON data may represent a security risk. So don't eval JSON data directly. Use some kind of JSON parser. Signing in at every visit can be a hassle. Enable automatic signing. And then also sign out. But don't store unencrypted passwords, of course. These are quite yeah. Conservative use of resources. You have to remember that this can't perform as good as your desktop machine. So minimize application and data size. Remove white space, minify or uglify. Minify HTML, CSS, and uglify script files. Optimize network requests, such as batch up multiple requests if possible and back off during periods of inactivity. Minimize external resources, merge scripts and CSS files into as few files as possible. Typically, we call this concatenation of files. Minimize sending of cookie information. Keep DOM size reasonable. Use pagination both in your GUIs and in your REST APIs. There are also some user experience guidelines you can follow. Optimize application startup time. That means consider partitioning large scripts and use local storage where appropriate. Have you heard the term above the fold? That means that you should prioritize everything that is viewable in the first screen that is loaded. So everything beneath there, which is not viewable for the user at first page load, you should down prioritize. So if there is an image here that should be viewed instantly whenever you load your application, that should be prioritized. And CSS rules that apply for above the fold. The fold is then the bottom of your screen. So if there are CSS rules that apply for only for what you see in the first viewable viewable graphics, then you prioritize this. And minimize perceived latency, enabling incremental rendering, avoid page reloads all the time. Make telephone numbers click to call, add a hyperlink with tel, as I mentioned, or SMS as protocol. Use meta viewport to identify desired screen sizes. And design for multiple interaction methods, focus-based, pointer-based, touch-based methods. You don't apply hover rules for mobile applications, for example. Do you know the hover rule in CSS? It's hard to hover something with your finger. Yes. Any questions to social web applications and mobile web applications? No? So no workshop based on this lecture, as I said. But there is a workshop that we haven't worked with from the lecture in week 5, so you can look into that. Maybe some of you have already looked into it. So try that out. Okay? I think we'll call it the day, actually.
We spend just a little bit of time to discuss how extensive the discussion should be on the mandatory event.
I can, yeah, if I can mention anything about that? Yes. Okay. I can do that. I should just wait a minute.